Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Coleman, and I am the Senior Director of Race and Gender Equity at YWCA South Florida. And for those of you who are joining us today or will be joining us in the future watching this recording, I want to extend a warm welcome to all of you. So just a few things at the top. We are recording this discussion, so it will be available for reviewing, for rewatching, and for those of you who are missing or who cannot stay for the whole event or missing the beginning of it, you are going to be able to rewatch this. You will also notice we have an ASL interpreter here. That is so that this discussion is accessible to those who are joining us. We hope to host an inclusive and accessible conversation. So we also have closed caption available if necessary. So welcome. We're really happy to have you all joining us because it means that you care about voting or helping someone that you know vote or helping someone in your community vote. So welcome. Thank you for joining us. We have 11 days left until the national election day. And we here at YWCA are doing everything we can to educate our community on the election and voting. Early voting in Florida started this past Monday. And I think as of 11 a.m., I checked the Florida Division of Elections, and it looks like over 1.1 million Floridians have already voted, which I could not believe. That's incredible. So that's exciting. But for those of you who haven't voted yet, but are planning to vote, today is your lucky day because we are talking with Amy Keith, the Executive Director of Common Cause Florida, about making a plan to vote. So, Amy, welcome. I want to start by thanking you for joining us after having to reschedule this conversation from Hurricane Milton. And I hope you and your community are somewhat back to normal. We were just talking about the Wi-Fi, access to Wi-Fi, but I hope you're doing well. And can you start off by introducing yourself and then telling us a little bit about Common Cause Florida?
Absolutely. And Sarah, thank you so much for having me and for hosting this event. It is just so important that we put things out in so many different formats that we can for people to access it in their own time. So that, people need to hear information in the way that they learn best. And so we always want to make sure that we're reaching out to meet people where they are. And I appreciate all your efforts to do that on voting. My name is Amy Keith, as you know. I'm the Executive Director of Common Cause Florida. We are a national nonpartisan organization that works to ensure accountability and transparency in government and ensure that every eligible voter has a voice in our democratic process. We work year-round on voter education and voter assistance. We work to make sure that our representation districts are fairly apportioned. We work to make sure that citizens have a voice in the constitutional initiative process. We work to make sure that there is ethics and transparency and open government laws in the state of Florida. And it's election season. So we also co-lead the Florida Election Protection Coalition, which is a coalition of 40 nonpartisan organizations across the state of Florida working to make sure that every ballot is cast and counted. And that is what I wanted to talk about. But today we can talk all we want about how you make a plan to vote. I'm happy to talk about the resources we have at Common Cause and within the Florida Election Protection Coalition.
Amazing. Wow. I've started calling people like you who do this work election wizards because I just think that your knowledge of all elections and voting and voter protection is just so unbelievable. And I've never been more grateful than this election season for people like you doing the work you do. So I'm excited that you're here with us today. Okay, I'm gonna start just at the top. I feel like this election cycle, it seems like I have been hearing about making a plan to vote nonstop. And it's not the first time it's ever been, brought up. It's not the first time we've ever heard make a plan to vote, but I do feel like I've heard it quite a bit this cycle. And I'm wondering, why is it such a big deal this time around to make a plan to vote?
Yeah, so I think in my world, it is always a big deal to make a plan to vote. But there's a lot of reasons why we've heard about this a lot this year. First of all, in a presidential election year, you're going to hear it a lot because turnout is so much higher. You already said it yourself. We're already seeing record turnout in the state of Florida. When turnout is higher, that means there are more people out there at the polls. Maybe you see more lines, you have more waiting. So making a plan to vote just means that you have not just your initial plan of how you plan to do it, but if something happens, if something goes wrong, you've got your backup plans. And of course, if you show up and there's a long line, but you got to get to work, well, if you already have a plan B, that's great. You know what you're going to be able to do to make sure your vote is cast and counted. So I think that's one reason, is that turnout is a lot higher. That's one of the reasons we encourage people to vote early, because it really gives you that time. Another reason why maybe we've heard more about that this year is, of course, the National Hurricane Center predicted a particularly active hurricane year this year, which, being a resident of St. Petersburg, I can attest to. We were hit by 2 hurricanes. And that hurricane, it may have affected some people's plans to vote by mail or how they were going to vote. And if you've been displaced by a hurricane, of course, you do also have to really think through, your options may have changed. So when we do see look, election season and hurricane season always overlap. So in Florida, we should always be making a plan and a backup plan, both for hurricanes and for voting. But when we have a particularly active season forecast, then that voting plan becomes, even in a presidential year, right, even more important. And then, of course, look, there's just life. Like, we're also in the middle of a housing crisis in Florida. People are, being forced to move when they don't want to. And so we don't want anybody to be disenfranchised because of the circumstances in their life. Every Floridian, regardless of their housing status, has a right to vote, and their voice is important. And you know what? Making a plan to vote can help you make sure your voice is heard, even if your life throws you a curveball in October or November.
Yeah, I think, we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the conversation about what a plan might look like for someone who's been displaced, or what a plan B might look like if your first plan falls through the cracks. I know I'm someone, I have always been skeptical of making a plan, because I'm like, why? I need a plan to vote. I need a plan. But I recognize that there is a privilege in that question. Why do I need a plan? I'll just go vote. But not everybody, can just leave work. Not everybody has a sitter. Not everybody, has, the mailbox. So there are, different communities facing different challenges. So making a plan, like you said, is just one way to ensure that we can vote. So what should people consider when making a plan to vote? Let's just do the basics. Like, what is the first thing that you do when making a plan to vote?
So making a plan to vote is going to be individual to each person, right? So you're going to be thinking about, like, what does your life look like? What's your work schedule, your access to transportation? You're thinking about your life, and you're also thinking about how you want to vote. What way to vote is easiest for you and most comfortable for you. So here in Florida, we have 3 different ways that we can cast our ballot. And so that's where you start with making a plan to vote. You're going to look at those 3 options and see what one is the best fit for you. And maybe thinking through which one is the second best fit for you, as you're thinking of not only what your voting plan A is, but what is your voting plan B. So one of the ways to vote, so if you want to get it all done super early, then what you're going to do is sign up to vote by mail. So voting by mail is a safe and secure means to vote. A lot of people became familiar with it during the pandemic back in 2020. Yes. But you know what? Voting by mail has been super popular in Florida from well before that. For vote by mail, any Floridian, any registered Florida voter can sign up to vote by mail, but you do have to sign up, and you have to sign up basically every federal election cycle in election speak. So that means if you sign up to vote by mail now, and today is the last day to get your mail ballot mailed to you in the state of Florida for the general election, if you were to request your mail ballot today, you would actually have to request it again in January, right? Because we've just had a federal election, you're going to have to request it again. So voting by mail, obviously we're already at the deadline today to have it mailed to you, but it's nice if you do it nice and early, because you're going to request your vote by mail ballot. They're going to mail it to your house, or they're going to mail it to the place where you reliably receive mail. So you can think about that. Like, that's part of your plan. Where's the best place to make sure that you're going to receive that mail ballot? And then it's going to come to your house, which is super helpful for local elections, because you might not even realize an election is happening if you're a busy person, but then that ballot arrives in your mailbox and you're like, hey, genius, look at that. It's right there. So then
that has happened to me.
Yes, it has happened to all of us. Let's be real. So you get the ballot, and then once it's in your house, right, you can sit there and you can go through all your options, and you've got plenty of time to sit there at your own kitchen table or on your own couch and research anything you want to research, to figure out how you want to vote. And then when you're making your plan for vote by mail, you have two different options for what to do with that ballot. Of course, you can mail it back. And if you mail it back, we usually say you want to give that at least a week to 2 weeks to get back. So we're really right on the cusp right now. Or you can drop it off. Every single early voting location in the state has a mail ballot drop box. You do have to drop it off in your own county. So that's important. But and you do have to make sure it gets back to the supervisor of elections by 7 p.m. on election day. So this is the thing with vote by mail. You got to sign it. You got to make sure it gets back on time, but you've got a long time frame to do it if you request it nice and early, and it gives you that time to really do it at home. That's our vote by mail option. And as I said, today is the last day. If you want a ballot mailed to you, you got to request it by 5 p.m. today, October 24th.
Get it done, y'all.
Get it done. Okay, our second way to vote is early in-person voting. I love early in-person voting because what I'm going to tell you is that this one has the least confusing rules. So early in-person voting happening right now in most counties. By Saturday, it must have begun in all counties, right? So every county has to have early voting at least from October 26th to November 2nd for our general election. But they're allowed to have early voting starting October 21st all the way to November 3rd. So that's a little bit different by your county, but really that piece that the times and dates are different per county, that's kind of the most confusing part of early voting. After that, you just look up where you want to go. You can go to any early voting location in your county. It does not matter which one. It can be the one near your work, it can be the one near your house, it can be the one that's on the bus route that you think is the most efficient. You can really go to any early voting location in your county where you are a resident. And you just have to bring your photo ID. We have 12 different photo IDs that are accepted here in the state of Florida. So that's all you got to figure out is which early voting locations near me. You show up during early voting and you're going to be able to vote in person right there. You can also drop off a mail ballot at that location as well.
Yeah, I actually, I was I have a big mom group chat, and I just was, one of the moms asked if they had to have a reservation at the poll and I was like, no.
So you don't have to, but actually in Palm Beach, you can make a reservation to make it easier for you if you want. So some counties do have a process where you can make an appointment if you want to just make sure you're not going to have to wait in line. Kind of to me, it kind of seems like it's, I think you're just going to be able to just plan your day even better. So when you go online and you look up the early voting locations and times for your county, part of your plan, you might see, hey, I can make an appointment. My plan just got way easier if you are
so cool.
Live by your calendar person like I am.
Yeah.
So that's a great option. But you don't have to make an appointment, but it can make it easier for you in some counties. All right, then we've got our third way to vote. Now, our third way to vote is, of course, in person on election day. And we know this is really meaningful to some people, and some people have family rituals around it, and they really love it. It is I would say it's a big election year. So I would not recommend that voting on election day be anybody's plan A, because it gives you the least amount of time to deal with stuff if something goes wrong.
Yeah.
So on election day, you have to vote in the polling place assigned to your current residence, right? You cannot vote in another place. So you have to vote at the polling place for your current residence. So there's only one place you can go to vote in person on election day. So it's really important that you look that up. It can change because we had our redistricting cycle. It may have changed because a polling place closed due to the hurricane because it was damaged. Really important to look up your polling place. You have to go to the correct one. And again, you've got to bring that photo ID. So that does make it a little tricky. I think one of the saddest things we see in our election protection work is somebody has always voted at the same location. So they go there maybe
Oh my
6:30,
gosh.
6:45 at night. Polling location has changed for whatever reason. They weren't aware, and they maybe don't have enough time to get over to their correct polling place. And that is
Oh,
just tragic. So that's the thing. And yeah, so that's really hard. So that's the thing with
yeah.
election day, you really got to go to that right place. And then there's like a third thing about your plan to vote, which I like to think of your little hybrid plan. And like this is me, this is my hybrid plan. You can request a vote by mail ballot and then decide to vote in person instead, which is why like vote by mail is so convenient, because you request that ballot and you've got it. And so you sit on your couch and you look at it, but you're like, yeah, but this year I'm feeling the energy, want to go vote in person. So you can actually bring your vote by mail ballot to any of the early voting locations with your location on election day, and you hand it in, they like will cancel it, and then you can vote in person instead. And even if you lost it or it got destroyed in the hurricane, you can still show up and be like, hey, I had a vote by mail ballot, but this is what happened. And they'll check the system because they make sure nobody can vote more than once. And then they'll give you an in-person ballot as well. So that's really helpful. But one thing we also see, which is I would say another one of the tragic things sometimes when the plan hasn't worked out quite right for someone, is you can't drop off a mail ballot at a regular polling place on election day. Lots of misinformation about that in Florida, because you can, of course, go and decide to vote in person. So it's fine if it's you, but if you go and you brought like your ballot and like your mom's ballot or your husband's ballot, that you can't just drop off their ballot there.
Oh, wow.
Like you could give, you could cancel your mail ballot and vote in person. But yeah, so that we also see a lot of people's, who intended to vote and their vote didn't get counted, because on election day, the only place you can drop off a mail ballot is at a supervisor of elections office.
Wow. Okay. That's a really good thing to know.
Yeah. But you can see, like, this is why it's important to make a plan to vote, because there's like just wonky rules. Like we fight year round to try to make these rules easier because we think it should be easier and clearer to understand, but that's where we are. So let's make sure that like, look at it, find the one easiest for you. And honestly, if you're not sure what's easiest for you, I'm going to tell you early voting.
Yeah.
Early in-person voting. It's happening right
Vote
now.
early.
Look it up for your county. Go this weekend.
Give yourself some
It is open
time.
this weekend in every county. And it honestly, just bring your photo ID. Show up at one of the ones in your county. And that is going to be just the easiest way. And go early to avoid lines.
Yeah. You just mentioned wonky rules. And there are so many, and I don't obviously want to go through every single wonky rule that there is, but there will be rules that throw a wrench into making a plan and your plan. So can you tell me a few of the wonkiest rules that there are? I remember a very specific one that you mentioned in a presentation you did about people who are houseless or homeless and don't have an address. And we mentioned the hurricanes, we mentioned being displaced or your polling place has moved. What are some of those, things that happen or circumstances that can hurt our plan to vote?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great question, because you know what? You can't disenfranchise someone for voting because of their address or because they don't have an address. If they are a resident of the state of Florida, then they can register to vote here in the state. If they're eligible to vote in Florida, they can register to vote in Florida. Different counties handle it differently if someone doesn't have an address. So in that case, you usually have to call the supervisor of elections office to see what address someone should use if they have none. But there's lots of different options with addresses. And I think my favorite wonky rule, everybody who's ever talked to me about voting knows my favorite wonky rule about Florida is that there is no deadline to change your address. So if you move this weekend from Miami to Orlando, when you get to Orlando, you can call the supervisor of elections and you can update your address. As long as you're already a registered voter in Florida, there is no deadline. So you can update your address and then you would vote at your new polling location right there in Orlando or at an early voting location in Orlando. And you can even update that address at the polls when you go vote. So I think that's really important for Floridians to know, especially now when we're in the middle of a housing crisis and people may have been displaced. They may have moved a couple times. People may have had to move because of the hurricane. You have to vote in the polling location in the county of your current permanent residence. So even if, say the hurricane completely upended your life and, you used to live in Pinellas and now you're staying with your mom in Palm Beach and, that's where you are for the time being. You're not going back to Pinellas because like that's not going to work out for you. And that's for the foreseeable future. You're there in Palm Beach. You can register to vote there in Palm Beach and make your voice heard. It's where you intend to be. Now, if you're temporarily displaced, right? So, you're just staying with someone for a couple of weeks and then you're coming back to Pinellas, then you would maintain your voter registration here in Pinellas and you would, want to opt to vote by mail in that case. But I think it's really great. I mean, you really do want to just update your address, but you can do that right there at the polls. And again, early voting, easiest thing with this, because as long as you're in the right county, you're going to be okay. So I really can't stress that enough. Don't panic about your address. If you are already registered to vote, the deadline for that was October 7th. Go to an early voting location in your county and they'll help you sort out your address issues.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. So you've got your plan. You're planning to early vote. You get in your car or you get on the bus and you are arriving to the poll that you've chosen, whichever one's closest. You get out and you walk into the polling place, you get to the ballot and oh my gosh, part of your plan did not include reading about who these people are or who are these judges or I don't know this name. Tell me about your plan once you are at the box, once you are at the ballot box. What can you do while voting to sort of become an informed voter? That's kind of a wild question, but I know so many people who are that person, they get to the box and they're like, who is this? I don't know what judge judicial somebody of group 29, like, so yeah. And even the amendments, we have I've educated myself on the amendments, but some of us will see amendment 2 and just be like, wait, what? So that's part of, I think, maybe making a plan is
100%. That is part of making a plan. We strongly recommend that people research this in advance. There are sample ballots that you can get from your county supervisor of elections website. They'll even email you a sample ballot so that even if you're deciding to vote in person, you can still see your choices in advance and do that research. Definitely recommend making that part of your plan. But yeah, absolutely. A lot of people show up and then they're like, oh my God, this is so long. So a couple of things here. So from Common Cause, like, there's lots of different resources out there that you can use to find out about this. Now, our work focuses on making sure people can make their ballot heard. Like, we don't get involved in recommending candidates or parties or anything like that.
Right.
That's not our work. But here's what I can tell you. There's going to be lots of people outside, especially for big polling locations and early voting. There might be a lot of what we call electioneers outside, people from the different parties. And sometimes they hand out like what we call slate cards. Like, they'll be like, hey, vote for these people, vote for these people. Now, you might get those. Maybe you take it. They're supposed to say who printed it, like who it's by. So that's just like a voter education thing. Look at like what it says in the fine print on those and make sure, that that's someone who matches your values. But you know what? Picking up something outside, you don't necessarily know what someone's handing you. Maybe you trust the group, maybe you don't. But all right, you're allowed to bring things like that into the voting booth with you, but you can't leave it in the voting booth, right? You got to make that voting booth a clean environment for every voter to make their own unbiased choices their own choices according to their values. So yeah, there is that stuff outside, but I do want to flag for folks that it's good to like be a little diligent about who's handing you that thing and what it says and read the fine print. But what you can do, which is great, there's this awesome thing that you can bring into the voting booth with you. And I'm going to tell you, it's super helpful. Yeah. I don't know if you have one of these. It's a phone and you can carry it with you everywhere. And it accesses the internet. It's amazing. So you can bring your phone into the voting booth with you and you can look up, the resources that lots of people provide different, but you can go to the website of an organization that you know and trust already, maybe an organization that, you've been engaging with or donating to long before, this election cycle. You can go to their website and you can look up, what are they recommending? That's the kind of thing. You can go to different organizations, have voter guides that are available. There are nonpartisan voter guides that are out there for different organizations. You can go to the party website for the party that you're a member of or agree with and see what they're recommending, the county party. You can go to local newspapers, often have voter guides, but you can take your time, look it up while you're in line. But you can look things up on your phone when you're there in the voting booth.
Okay.
That is okay. You're going to have your own private space there. But those are some of the places that have voter guides. Local newspapers, nonpartisan organizations have nonpartisan voter guides. And you can, I always say, just go to organizations you already know and trust,
Yeah,
that are important in your life, and see what people who share your values are recommending on these candidates and issues. But yeah, definitely a thing to research in advance. But I do want you to know that you can bring your phone into the booth if you need to.
awesome. Is there a time limit on being in the booth? If you're just in there like
So I mean, eventually the
scrolling
poll's
and
going to
reading.
close, and if there's a long line,
Yeah.
but like, no, take the time you need to vote.
Yeah. Yeah.
The ballot is long. Take
It
the time
is.
you need
Yeah.
to
It's
vote.
2 pages. I couldn't believe, I was like, what's there's another page.
It's a different length in different counties because different people have all sorts of
Yeah.
local measures and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, it's so important to research it in advance. I can't stress that enough because it is long, and you're just going to make your life easier if you get that sample ballot from the Supervisor of Elections website. Look at your choice. You can bring the sample ballot into the booth with you. And it makes your voting process super easy. So, I mean, that's my advice: is do the research in advance with a sample ballot. Look to organizations that you trust and that share your values. And, just make sure if you get handed something right outside the polling place that you give that a close look to make sure that it's
who's printing that.
People do all sorts of shenanigans out there. So just, be careful.
Okay. So I love all of that. I'm one of those people who gets in the box and I'm just like, what? Who? So I appreciate all of that information. Okay, so the other aspects of making a plan to vote, you have the logistics, you have the once you're there, and then how do we ensure that our vote is counted? I know with vote by mail, you have the signature, right? You have to sign it at the ballot. If you go in person, you filled out your ballot, you hand it to the poll workers, or you inserted, I think the last time I did it, I like inserted it into something. But after that, do you have a plan for, if they say, no, this doesn't count, this looks weird, or your signature doesn't match. I've heard a lot of different feedback about, well, my mom didn't count because her signature didn't match her other signature. And there's all these little things that pop up after you voted. So what do we do then? What's our plan once we're done voting and we think we're done?
So the first thing I'm going to say is that at in-person voting, you're not going to encounter a signature issue because you do that before you vote and you have to check in. And that's a nice thing about in-person voting because they walk you through the process and you put your vote into the tabulator and then you're done and it's counted.
Yeah.
Right. So you're not going to have an issue with signature after that. Right. That's why a lot of people do like in-person voting. I'll tell you that voting by mail, very safe and secure. Yes, we sign the ballot. You can track your vote by mail ballot online, and that is great. So if your signature doesn't match on your vote by mail ballot, the Supervisor of Elections will notify you, and they have to notify you by mail. But if you gave them your phone number and your email or your email address, they'll contact you. Most supervisors will also contact you by those means to let you know if there was a problem. But you can be proactive about this. Right. You can track your ballot on your county Supervisor of Elections website, and you can see, has it been received? Has it been counted? And there'll be a notice on there if there was a problem and what you should do. You can also, pro tip, just call the Supervisor of Elections office. If you sent in your mail ballot, maybe you can't really figure out the tracker, you're just not good with the internet, you can call and be like, hey, is everything okay with my vote by mail ballot? If there is a problem with the signature on your vote by mail ballot, you have until the Thursday after Election Day at 5 p.m. to fix that signature.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So just make sure you do track. Your vote by mail ballot has to arrive by 7 p.m. on Election Day.
Yeah.
But if there's a problem with it, right, you have until 5 p.m. on the Thursday after Election Day to fix that problem. And often that's just a signature affidavit that you can print off, fill it out at home, take a picture of it or scan it and email it in. Because they're just going to confirm your signature. So I just want to know that there is a way to track it and make sure, but in person, you're going to put it right into the scanner yourself.
Yeah.
In most cases. So then I think the other, and then I say in most cases, because there is also provisional ballots. So this is a provisional ballot is like a backup ballot, right? So if you go vote in person, say you lost all of your ID documents because of the flooding and Hurricane Helene.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of people lost like so many documents that, I mean, it was epic storm surge, record breaking. So say you lost all your documents, you can still go vote in person. You're going to have to vote what's called a provisional ballot. And a provisional ballot is, it's a backup, right? It's saying like, okay, there's some kind of question about your eligibility or your registration, or you don't have the right ID. So you're going to fill out this form. You're going to sign it like you would sign a vote by mail ballot, but you're going to get to cast your vote. Most important, if you don't cast your ballot by 7 p.m. on election day, you didn't vote. Provisional ballot makes sure that every eligible registered voter is able to do that, even if there's a question. Now, that goes to what we call the canvassing. The canvassing board is who adjudicates our they maybe adjudicate's not the right word. I don't want to get into legalistics, but they're the folks who are looking at whether or not a ballot can be counted if there's any question. They're the people who oversee our vote counting process. The canvassing board is comprised of the supervisor of elections, a representative of the county commission, and a judge. And they are going to look at those provisional ballots and see if it can be counted, right? If there's an issue, if the person presented other backup identity or other documents, they're going to look at it and they're going to decide if it can be counted. But we do have really clear processes in place for voters to be able to cast their ballot and have confidence that that ballot has been counted. You can track it, you call, you put it in the tabulator yourself. The canvassing board looks at anyone that has a question. For a provisional ballot, you can also follow up to see if that was counted. So those processes and the redundancies do exist. We have really strong election administration in the state of Florida. We really
I think you've sort of tapped into something I wanted to talk briefly about, which is sort of like the misinformation, disinformation portion of voting right now. And I know over the weekend, I was just listening to a podcast about how many people are early voting because they're worried about what happened during the 2020 election and believing that their vote was not counted, that there was election fraud, that there were, all sorts of nefarious things going on with our votes and with our ballots. And so I do want to maybe talk a little bit about the security of our elections. And you guys are in voter protection and election protection. So can you just talk a little bit about, that process and, is it safe? Are our votes counted? Do they get counted?
Yeah, it's safe. I'll tell you that. Voting is safe and secure in the state of Florida. Florida really does have excellent election administration. And it's funny because if I talk to folks from other states and they're like, oh, Florida about it, and I get like a little chip on my shoulder because I'm like, yo, our election administration is great in the state of Florida. There are so many redundancies. There are so many checks and balances to make sure that each voter can vote once and only once, and that one ballot is cast and counted. There are, we have multiple ways, as we've talked about, that you can cast that ballot, and each of those ways has their own mechanisms to ensure that the ballots are, properly kept. There are security mechanisms and there are permissions of who can look at things. Nothing is connected to the internet. That, it's our voting process is safe. And you know what? In Florida, we all vote on voter verified paper ballots. That's the thing in Florida, right?
Yeah.
You see on paper how you voted before you put it in the scanner, or you see how you voted on paper before you drop off your mail ballot or mail it in, right? That is like, there is a paper record of your vote, right? And you see that paper record before it goes. So I think, to me, that's the thing. It's like, I saw it on paper, I know, and that is what went in to be counted.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. I appreciate that. I think there's just a lot of, reminders of past election situations and, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always important to remember that like voting and election administration in the United States is safe and secure.
Yeah.
A lot of people right now are trying to make you believe that it isn't.
Yeah.
Because they want you to stay home on your couch. And this is the thing. People are using your fear and your apathy against you to silence you. Don't let them do that, right?
Yeah.
Like, cast your vote, go vote, have confidence in the fact that America runs some of the best elections on earth, right? Like, our elections are safe and secure. And the people who are telling you they're not, it's because they're trying to take your vote away through fear and apathy.
Yeah.
Don't let them win.
Awesome, Amy. Yeah, 100%. Everything you just said. Okay, so I got asked this question a couple days ago, and I kind of was just like, oh, I don't know. And I'm gonna make it a part of my making a plan to vote plan. Self-care. This election has been bananas. It's so close, it's so tight. We're all working just like overtime on voter engagement and getting out the vote. And it's all we hear about, it's all we see, it's everything right now. And so I'm wondering what comes after you're done voting, you have faith in our election system, you go home, and then what is your plan for self-care? and is that something that you plan to have in your making a plan?
I think everybody's self-care around elections is really different. I mean, elections affect people emotionally in so many ways. People get very invested into issues. They get very invested into candidates. They may not agree with some of the people closest to them in their life about, these, votes that will affect, all of us, right?
Yeah.
So I think everyone's self-care plan is going to look really different. I do think it's important to think about it. For me, I really like to lean into the joy. Obviously I spend all election day in a nonpartisan voting rights command center. I spend all of election day, 14 hours in the nonpartisan election protection command center, helping make sure that every voter gets their questions answered and everybody can have their ballot cast and counted. And after that, I want to go out with my other colleagues who work on voting rights and voter protection, and celebrate how many people came out to make their voice heard in the Democratic process.
That's awesome.
That's important to me. Everybody's process is going to be really, really different. So elections take a lot. But I think one really important thing with your self-care, especially for this election, is it's really important to remember that election night is not results night. And I think that can create a lot of anxiety if you're not anticipating. When you're thinking about taking care of yourself, when you're thinking about going out and celebrating after the election or commiserating if it didn't go your way, right? Then I think it's really important to remember that like that celebration, that commiseration, it's not results night yet, because what we get on election night is preliminary returns. In Florida, again, great election administration, we start counting mail ballots early. We get our results, like our preliminary returns, really quickly. Some states, their processes don't let them count their vote by mail ballots until election night, which means it's going to take some time because we want every ballot counted. So I just think, just don't be anxious about that. It is normal. It means democracy is working if it is, and that's how it's built in. That's in the law. We get preliminary returns on election night, and then we have a first round of results. Then we have a second round of results, and then we have the official results, because we count all the mail ballots, we count all the provisional ballots. So that's going to be my big, like, regardless of how you choose, on election night or after you vote, just be aware that election night isn't results night, and that shouldn't create anxiety. It should create a sense of confidence that all votes are being counted. Yeah.
Awesome. That's such a wonderful way to look at it. I think the joyful part of everyone participating in democracy is very, very cool way to look at it. So yeah. Okay. Any final call to action from Common Cause Florida? Anything you want the people to know as they go out and cast their votes, or maybe they're not planning on voting, or, you know, maybe they already have voted. Any last sort of thing you want to say?
Yeah, I think, I mean, for me, I always like to say like that people will say things like, you know, they don't think voting matters. They don't think, and I'm just going to say that, like, if it didn't matter, there wouldn't be people who have literally spent hundreds of years and billions of dollars trying to stop people they didn't want to vote from voting. You know, it matters because the
Yeah.
time and money investment into trying to get people to not do it. And that goes all the way from rules which prohibit certain people from voting. And it goes all the way through making it more difficult with ID. And it goes
Yeah.
all the way through that apathy and that fear that we talked about.
Mhm.
Your vote matters. So that, I mean, that's my big question is like, make your voice heard by 7 p.m. on November 5th, because it does matter. So that's like my kind of like big purpose last
Yeah.
thing. But then I actually have this like great little pro tip that I wanted to like flag for folks who are planning to vote in person this election, because we are seeing long lines, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we know, and in Florida, the past, we do, like I said, sometimes there's aggressive electioneers and there's folks shouting all that stuff at you. And so here's my tip. Like a lot of us, we have like little noise canceling earbuds in our bag. We have our headset with our phone. When you're going to vote, if you're planning to vote in person, expect that there might be a line, that there might be a lot of people with candidates out there. Go with that, like knowing that and prepared for that as part of your plan. Make a playlist that inspires you.
I love it.
Pick a playlist. Listen to music that, like, you know, is going to inspire you to be part of this process. And put those earbuds in. Ignore all that external noise. Motivate yourself, inspire yourself for being able to participate in democracy. Then when you're in line, you got your music. Then if people are shouting, turn up your music. Get into the vote. It takes you a long time. You got your music. So if that, or your podcast or your audio book, but I think it's just something very accessible and simple for a lot of us. You know, however it is that you consume media on your little portable computer that we carry in our pockets, use that as a tool to help cancel out some of the, you know, the distractions that might be out there at the polls. So bring yourself joy in participation in democracy. Make a plan for your joy in participation in democracy.
I love that, Amy. Yes, I love that so much. I wish I didn't vote by mail now because I want to make a playlist and go wait in line, but I already decided.
Well, you know what, Sarah?
I sent in my ballot.
Playlist. You can come be a poll monitor with election protection. Bring your playlist there. Share it with others.
I actually volunteered to be a poll monitor during the last election. And then I don't remember why I couldn't do it. Something came up. I can't remember. Maybe it was COVID and I had a baby. I think it was because I had a baby. Yep. I remember now. Okay. Okay. I'm going to open it up to questions. We have not very many people here, but that's okay. They might have some burning questions. Does anybody have any questions for Amy? In the chat if you want, or you can come off mute and ask questions. Taylor, Kyle, Meredith, I see you. Anybody?
Christy, Mimi.
Christy,
questions?
Mimi, yeah, you all are a part of this as well. If you have questions, maybe access questions. I love, you know, I love letting people know that what their rights are as far as like accessible voting. Oh, you're welcome, Meredith. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Meredith.
Yeah, I love letting people know what their rights are as far as like accessibility. And I'm not sure if that's like an arena that you venture into in election protection.
100%. Yeah, actually, we have a program. We partner with Disability Rights Florida. We have a voting rights legal monitor program, which is around the state, not only responding to voter rights issues for all voters, but specifically assessing polling locations for accessibility in accordance with federal and state law. So we have lawyers who will be out there on election day working with Disability Rights Florida to assess locations for accessibility. So we care a lot about this in election protection. So let me do a quick rundown of your rights. So voters are, they have a right to have an accessible polling place, right? That anybody, should be able to walk in, enter, should be easy to access the physical space of the polling place. and they have a right to have an accessible marking device available at the polls. Every polling place must have an accessible marking device available, set up, working, and set up in such a way that it preserves the privacy of that voter's vote, so no one can look over their shoulders and things like that. Now, those marking devices have multiple different inputs so that people are able to cast their ballot in the way that works for them. And then that is available. Now, fun fact, any voter can actually use that marking device if it makes them, if they're more comfortable using that. So that has to be available at the polls so that people with disabilities can vote privately and independently, just like all voters. Another right is that you can bring someone to assist you. Now, the voter can bring anyone they choose as long as it is not their employer or a representative of their union. But other than that, they can bring anyone they choose to help them vote. Because it's just important that people have someone they trust, like who's in there and helping them. Now, if they don't have somebody to bring with them, they can also receive assistance from 2 poll workers if needed. So that is some of the assistance that's available at the polls. And then in addition, in Florida, we have accessible vote by mail. Every county must offer it. So after someone signs up for their vote by mail ballot, they can request an accessible ballot. The ballot will be sent to them electronically, and they can use their preferred technology to fill out that ballot, and then they print it and they send it in just like all other ballots. Yeah,
that's great.
So we have multiple ways to ensure that people in Florida with disabilities are able to access the ballot in the way that works best for them.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you for sharing all of that. Does anybody else have any questions? Taylor, you're muted if you're asking a question.
How do I get off mute? No, I'm kidding. Amy, I have a question. I don't know if it's too personal, but I kind of wanted to know how, not like who you're voting for, but how you're voting. Like, what's your voting plan? Because I just feel like you are the Michael Jordan of voting to me right now.
So because I'm a geek, I'm a voting geek, as we all know. So I do like to try different plans out each election just so that I understand that experience for a voter. And I've got a personal experience to support people through that. I am definitely voting early. I'm going to do early in-person voting. And actually, I might opt to use that accessible voting machine because I've never used it. And every voter is able to use one if they choose. I don't want to inconvenience or create more work for the poll workers. That's my main, like, I always want to, like, because I love that people volunteer to work at the polls. That's like the most amazing thing you can do to like civically engage in your community. Number one thing you can do, be a poll worker. I swear to God, do that. If you're not sure what to do if you're not sure what to do to help in an election, that's the thing to do. It's a 14-hour day. It's a long day with a lot of training, but do that. Anyhow, that aside, I am kind of thinking that I've never used that device, and we work so closely with our colleagues at Disability Rights Florida, and I want to understand what using that machine is like for voters with disabilities. So, but I haven't really made my decision yet, but I know that I'm
You haven't made your plan? No, I'm kidding.
I have multiple plans. I have my vote by mail ballot at home. I have already done my research about how I am going to vote. I know that I'm going to vote early in person. I just haven't decided if I'm going to vote early in person on a hand-marked paper ballot or if I'm going to use the ballot marking device.
That's so interesting. That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure. I like that question. I don't think nobody's ever asked me that question.
Really?
Good question, Taylor. Way to go.
Great question.
You know, I feel like that's like the best compliment you can get as someone who doesn't know something.
No, that's seriously. I've never had that question. I had a thing I wanted to add because I know I talked about it with disability access, but I did want to talk about language access for just a second to let people know. Okay, so 2 fun facts about Florida. Okay, so first of all, same thing with language access. You can bring anyone you want to assist you at the polling location. They don't have to be a registered voter. They don't even have to be an adult. Like some people have their like teenager translate for them, right? You have to sign like a form that you're assisting. It's a thing, but yeah, so just to know that if you need assistance from someone, you can bring whoever you want, except again, not your employer or representative. The other thing in Florida is every county has to provide a Spanish language ballot. So like either a bilingual ballot or they'll give you a ballot in Spanish. So you can ask for a ballot in Spanish.
What
and I would
about,
also, oh, sorry.
what about Haitian Creole? Is that a thing
Yeah,
yet?
so in Miami, according to local law, you have to have a ballot in Haitian Creole. But Miami's the only county that's required. But actually, don't quote me on this, but I think Broward also provides the assistance in Haitian Creole voluntarily. But again, the check about how that is with the ballot. But yeah, so a lot of counties in Florida are required to provide all voting information in Spanish under federal law. Miami is required under local law to provide everything in Haitian Creole, but every county has to provide at least a Spanish language and English language ballot. And I just want to pop one thing because we have got, oh, I do not know what's happening. Sorry. My computer is making a noise and I'm so sorry about this.
It's okay.
Actually,
we can not really hear it. I heard.
All right, that's great. So it's just distracting me. All right. I'm so sorry about that.
That's okay.
What I want to say is that the election protection hotlines are available for all voters. 866-OUR-VOTE is the English language hotline. We work with them directly in the Florida boiler room. We also have, and I'm going to make sure
I see it.
888-VE-VOTA is the Spanish language hotline. And Florida this year, we're very excited. We have a Haitian Creole nonpartisan voter support line. You can dial 727-308-3009, and you're going to push option 2, and you can receive voter assistance support in Haitian Creole anywhere in the state of Florida. And that is
amazing.
From the Nonpartisan Election Protection Coalition. If they have a question, it very well might be me answering it. So you need help.
Yeah. But that's a wonderful resource. And after we record this, I'll type up a lot of what we talked about and share that with the recording so that people have sort of like resources to go with this. Okay. Does anyone have any more questions? I think my questions have been answered. I'm kind of disappointed now that I did vote by mail because I want to make another plan. I'm so inspired by making a plan.
I don't want to hear any of this. I'm disappointed that I voted. That question doesn't exist. So stop.
I just wish my voter plan was more exciting. This conversation just makes me want to vote all over again. So, Amy,
you only vote once, Sarah.
I know. Don't worry, everyone. I will not vote. I will not try to illegally vote 2 times.
They won't let you because there are procedures in place to prevent that. Fun fact.
Safe elections, right?
Elections are safe and secure in the state of Florida.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Amy. I really appreciate your time. This was so wonderful and so helpful. And I know when we share this out, it will be very helpful for everyone who watches it. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for your time. And yeah, happy voting.
Yeah, happy voting. And thank you, everybody. I hope anybody watching, make your plan, get out there, make your voice heard. It matters. It really does.
100%.
Thank you.
All right, everybody.
And thank you so much for having me and for organizing this.
Anytime. I'll send you the copy. All right. Take care, everybody. And we will see you next time.